Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation introducing the new National Benchmarking Portal. My name's Sarah Neville and I'm the Director of Analytics at the Independent Hospital Pricing Authority. Bit of an outline to get us started. I'll start off with a brief introduction to the Independent Hospital Pricing Authority, just in case you're not familiar with the organisation and the work that we do. We'll then jump into talking about the new National Benchmarking Portal. We'll give you a little bit of background on the portal. We'll go into detail about the first dashboards that are being released, which are all to do with the cost per national weighted activity unit. And then we'll give you a little bit of a preview at the end of the presentation. So a bit of an introduction to IHPA to start off with. IHPA was created under the National Health Reform Act back in 2011, so the organisation's just over 10 years old. Our major function and the reason that IHPA came into being was to create a nationally consistent framework and implementation of activity-based funding at a national level. We create the data specifications, costing standards, classification systems, and national efficient price every year in strong consultation with states and territories in particular, but also lots of other important stakeholders. Three of the major pillars on which IHPA is built are independence, that's right there in the title, but we're also incredibly consultative with the work that we do, both with the public and all of our key stakeholders, and we're very transparent. And I guess it's that transparency that is the real pillar that's underpinning why we are going public with the new National Benchmarking Portal. So as I mentioned on that previous slide, the major function of IHPA is to create a nationally consistent activity-based funding framework and system. Australia is obviously a federation of states and territories, and there are hundreds of public hospitals throughout Australia. Now, those public hospitals receive a combination of funding from the Commonwealth and also from states and territories. It is IHPA's major function to create the price of these public hospital services every year. Now, the funding that's provided from the Commonwealth through to local hospital networks within states and territories is a function of the change in price every year, but also the change in the volume and mix of services that are delivered by states and territories. So it's states and territories as system managers that determine the volume and the mix and distribution of services that are delivered. It's IHPA's role to determine the price of those services every year, and they're published in the National Efficient Price Determination every year, available on our website. Okay, so we've covered IHPA's function and the pillars on which IHPA is built and its major functions. Now let's move into discussing the National Benchmarking Portal. So we do have an existing National Benchmarking Portal, and our state and territory representatives will be aware of that one. It's currently hosted by New South Wales Health on IHPA's behalf, and that's been around since 2016. Access to this existing benchmarking portal is controlled by state and territory health departments. Now, some states and territories pass on that access to staff in public hospitals throughout their state or territory, clinicians, hospital managers, CFOs, CEOs, to name a few. Some state and territory health departments don't pass on access past their own staff. Now, the Pricing Authority, IHPA's board, has had this priority of broadening access to cost and activity data, and it's been canvassed in the pricing framework for Australian public hospital services since 2021, and that's open to public consultation every year. It was in last year, so mid-2021, that IHPA began development of this new national benchmarking portal, one that will provide broader access to hospital and cost data, so the same level of access for the general public, people in hospitals, clinicians, managers, and also people in state and territory health departments that have access to the current NBP. Okay, the new National Benchmarking Portal. Well, what is it? It's a website-based application that provides open access to insights from data collected by IHPA. It allows users to compare cost and activity data from public hospitals throughout the country using the Cost Per National Weighted Activity Unit, or the NWAU. Cost Per NWAU dashboards will be launched very soon, before the end of April this year. So obviously we're pre-recording this session. They will be live when you are viewing this session as part of the conference. Still to come are dashboards on hospital-acquired complications and avoidable hospital readmissions, which will be released later in 2022. Now, what is this Cost Per National Weighted Activity Unit, or Cost Per NWAU, that's informing these first dashboards that are being released in the new NBP? Well, the Cost Per NWAU measures actual cost adjusted for case mix. So we've got an equation explaining it there. It's the total cost of delivering public hospital services divided by the National Weighted Activity Unit, which is a standardised activity measure, which I like to think of as the currency of national activity-based funding. This cost per NWAU is influenced by the cost profile of a hospital on the numerator, but also the mix of services delivered. So for example, a hospital delivering predominantly dialysis will have much lower NWAU than a hospital delivering more complex services like heart transplants or hip replacements. The National Weighted Activity Unit, or the NWAU, is also influenced by length of stay. The Cost Per NWAU brings together changes in cost and activity into one measure. And it means that hospitals providing very different services can be compared in a fair manner. Bit of an illustrative example here. So here we have Hospital A. It primarily provides acute and ED services, and it's in an outer regional area. We then have Hospital B. It primarily provides subacute and outpatient services, and it's in an inner regional area. Now, if we were comparing the efficiency of these hospitals in a naive manner, we might compare the average cost per separation for these hospitals. But because Hospital A is delivering more complex services, potentially, to Hospital B, this might be quite an unfair comparison because we're not taking into consideration the patient types and the type of activity that's being done at these hospitals. If we then, instead of doing the cost per separation, we bring in the cost per NWAU, we have a much fairer comparison. So we're now, instead of just measuring separations, we're using NWAU. That's taking into consideration the complexity of services that are delivered, length of stay, and any adjustments that are in the price. And we now have a fair comparison. A little bit of a preview of the new National Benchmarking Portal here on the screen. At the time of recording, a couple of weeks away from launch, so this is a penultimate dashboard, but very close to what will be going live at the end of April and what you'll be able to see now if you go to the website. So what we're doing here, when you jump into the overview page, which will come up when you go into the new National Benchmarking Portal, you can select a particular hospital, which we've anonymised here. And what will come up is this set of indicators across the top, the middle of which is the cost per NWAU for the selected hospital. But if you'd selected a particular state or a particular stream, the cost per NWAU for that selection would come up in the middle here. Off to the left, we have the cost per NWAU for all hospitals nationally. And this updates if you select a particular stream, but at the moment that's across all streams. And then this other indicator is the cost per NWAL for the peer group in which the hospital selected sits. So this particular hospital happens to be a principal referral hospital. We then have the total records that these figures are based on for the current selection. And then a little bit more detail about the cost profile, so the numerator of the cost per NWAL, and then also the NWAL, which is the denominator of our cost per NWAL. We then have this first graphic, which compares the current year's selected cost per NWAL. So here we've got 1920, and we're comparing that to the previous year's cost per NWAL in the dark green dot. And we do that for each group in which this hospital selected sits. So we have the national group, the state, the LHN, and the peer group that this hospital sits in, and then the hospital itself there as well. With this graph, we might want to know what particular things are driving a particularly high or low cost per NWAL. Here we've decided to break that down by stream. So we have the cost per NWAL for admitted acute, subacute, mental health, ED, and non-admitted, compared to the national average, which is the dark green dash, or the peer group average in light blue. If you did want to make other selections, so for example, if you had selected a particular state as your current selection and you wanted to see how particular LHNs were driving a particularly high or low cost per NWAL, you would select the state in your filters here, and then you might want to break down this graphic by local hospital network. Okay. So just to wrap up, you can go and see the new National Benchmarking Portal at the web address on the screen. And there's also lots of supporting materials such as an instructional video, a user guide, and technical specifications if you're interested in the data preparation that fed into the new NBP. Thanks very much.